What are the other small pleasures that you really love to indulge in?
I get up early enough to watch the dawn break and the sunrise. After that, I might go to sleep again, but I don't want to miss the sunrise. My masterpiece is yet to be written. 50 different ways of boiling an egg. Because I can boil an egg. I don't make lists anymore, except of publishers who owe me maybe royalties. Then I kick off the one who's paid me and put a question mark against those who haven't. Yeah, my only other ambition, I think, was to be a tap dancer at one time.
Why do they call you the road inspector?
That goes back to when I was about 19, 20 in Dehradun. We always want something a little better.
We are greedy, sir. We are just greedy, and I think sometimes
we are greedy. We are greedy. Yeah, I'm greedy. I'm greedy. I always want that second strawberry milkshake.
I had never dreamt that I will ever be able to talk to you. So this is now a dream that I never dreamt, but coming true. All right, we shall start. Good evening.
Athira.
Good evening, Mr. Bond.
Dr. Nair.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How are you doing, sir?
Thank you. A bit cold up here. We've had a couple of very cold days. That's why you see me wrapped up.
I do see that, and I can't thank you enough, sir. I'm sure it's super cold there and you just want to curl up in a ball and sure not be doing this, but really thank you. I want to start this conversation by telling you that you have contributed to the country, to the literature world, way more than you can ever imagine. I'm assuming that there are too many people like me who are in awe of you. And this honestly is an honor, sir. I cannot express how thrilled and excited I am to talking to you.
You're very kind. Thank you. You're right. I'm not always aware of what effect my stories might or might not have. But over the years, I've done my best to entertain, especially young readers, and maybe to give them a love of nature and of kindness.
I'm sure, sir. I was just telling my friend the other day that you must know that I'm an army kid. And every time my parents got a posting, we moved to a different a world, a land. I had to make new friends and everything was very different. And the only thing that remained constant were your books. Like I have read your book since I was a child and I still read it today. And it's just fantastic, sir. You just keep going on and on. You're 90 years old and you've seen the world pass by and it's so fantastically amazing, sir.
Well, I realized this morning I was sitting in the little sunny balcony and writing a bit, and I was thinking, I'm 90 now, but I'm just getting into my stride as far as writing goes. There's so much more I want to say and write about and do it better, because you have to keep trying to write better, actually, as you go along. And it's a nice feeling also to have written, and for, let's say, about 3 generations now. When your parents were young, they might also have come across something I wrote.
That's true.
Or even, it makes me feel even older when I meet somebody who's a grandparent and they say they've been reading me, back in 1950. So, but I'm lucky that way. I think sometimes I feel life is a bit of a game of chance, but in a way, it's been kind to me.
So I think we must say that we are lucky that you chose and you decided that this one novel will inspire me. I will run away and I will come back and I will be this writer. And you've been a one and a legendary one, sir. So you have grown up through the during the Nehru times, right? You moved to Missouri sometime around 1964. That's when my mother was born. Okay, so you have
1954. Huh? No.
64. Okay, all right, my bad.
Yes. Well, I finished school in 1950, and my first story was published the year I left school, 1951. And my first novel, 1955 also.
Right.
And my latest book a few weeks back. So, and there are a couple lined up for this year. I've just realized we're already into 2025, and I've got things to write about still.
I'm sure, sir. And we will come to your new releases very soon. But the question that I was kind of getting at was that you've grown up through the Nehru times, you've seen the country evolve post independence to the modern times right now, right? You have, how do you think, you know, the country's cultural and social fabric has sort of evolved? And what do you think has sort of remained the same in your personal experience?
Well, changes have come, of course, but they've come gradually because, after all, it's over 75 years since independence. And I was, in 1947, I was 12, 13 years old. So a lot was going on, certainly. World War II was just over. And my father served in the RAF. And at the same time, the Quit India movement was going on when I was about 8. And then when I was in boarding school, 1947, when independence came, and about the same time partition. That led to a lot of trauma and you might say chaos, but things settled down pretty quickly, and the 1950s in general were a peaceful decade. And people got along with each other.
Right.
And they still do, actually, unless they've been maybe been influenced too much by conflicts around the world and not just in India. So times have changed. Back in the 1950s, the middle class was a very small class of people, you might say, and there weren't many schools where you could get a good education. Compared to today, when there are hundreds of thousands of schools all over the country, and most kids can go to school, and should be going to school, unlike myself, who ran away once or twice. I wasn't the ideal schoolboy, certainly, but nevertheless, a good schooling, I think, is all important. So times, yes, have changed, and we've become technologically, very smart, and things are it's easier to communicate and to acquire knowledge. And I'm a pretty illiterate, technologically speaking. I don't even keep a mobile phone. I depend on Shrishti or her brother Siddharth.
I see.
For that matter, I don't keep a landline either, because for one thing, it never worked. Yeah? So I got rid of it. And
honestly,
in fact, Shrishti one day brought me a phone, a handheld mobile phone, and I held it to my ear. Nothing happened. She said, "You have to switch it on." So I switched it on. Nothing happened. She said, "No, you won't get a good reception in this room. You have to go to the window."
Right.
So I went to the window. Nothing happened. She said, "Open the window." So I opened the window. She said, "Lean out of the window." So I leant out of the window and I dropped the phone. It fell on the road. So some schoolgirls were passing and they very kindly picked it up and brought it back to me. And then I gave it to her. And with these things work perfectly with her and with all young people, but not with me. So I'm a very impractical person, except when I write.
Sir, I have been reading up a lot. Given I had to do this interview, and I was so excited and jittery and everything, and I realized that there are a lot of things that are very similar between us. I am a very clumsy person, sir, so I completely understand the state that you were in. So I also wanted to sort of understand in your journey from your childhood to this very moment, right? How has the meaning of home evolved for you?
I have a very lively home in that I have a large family who grew up around me over the years. Um, 60s parents and their parents too, from 1970. So I'm used to home life. I have a home life, unlike some bachelors who don't. So I'm a bachelor with a family. And but before that, if I go back to my 20s, 30s, 40s, I, I, I lived alone for long periods. Um, and with the result that I was a skinny fellow. And now I'm the very opposite of skinny. So that's something that home life does for you. But and I was it was good fun being a freelance, a freebooter, and sort of uh, um, surviving on what I could sometimes cook myself. I'm the world's worst cook, although I can. My masterpiece is yet to be written. 50 different ways of boiling an egg. Because I can boil an egg. So I lived on things like uh, boiled eggs and failed omelets and other things. So, and freelancing and the insecurity of being a freelance writer was in a way an adventure. And because I always had a sort of romantic view of writing from the time I left school, because I'd grown up on books and I wanted to emulate my favorite authors.
Right.
Not write like them, but be one too. And
yes, sir.
so it was a romantic conception. I just, wanted to be a writer and an author and have books under my name. And that was a dream. And it was a dream that I realized after some time and after some effort and after some disappointment. but it was a dream realized. And so I think sometimes romance does come off in one's life. Um, so, so there it is. I'm fortunate that I could make my way as a writer because I wasn't very good at other things.
Right.
Yeah, my only other ambition, I think, was to be a tap dancer at one time. But I don't have the figure for it now.
Yeah, but very much the spirit for it yet. Absolutely.
Yeah. So there it is, and I think the gods have been kind to me.
So if you had to live your life all over again, would there be anything that you would change? Anything at all?
A few things I would maybe do things. Try not to hurt people. If at some stage in my life I might have been unkind or cruel or done something that might have hurt others, my mother or a family member or a friend. So some things maybe, and I, but not my life as a whole. The pattern of my life. I mean, I would still want to be a writer if I had to live again. Maybe a better writer, but nevertheless a writer. Yeah. And I would like to be, as I am now, still close to nature. And I like living amongst books too, and I wouldn't mind having not exactly the same life all over again, but something like it.
Do you?
It's slightly better. We always want something a little better.
We are greedy, sir. We are just greedy, and and I think sometimes that
we are greedy. We are greedy. Yeah, I'm greedy. I'm greedy. I always want that second strawberry milkshake. That too, yeah.
So we are aware that you love your bread, your butter, your sausages, and your brunch and everything. And these are the little small pleasures that you indulge. And now I also know that you like the strawberry milkshake. What are the other small pleasures that you really love to indulge in?
I think just sitting in the early morning sun, if the sun comes up, as it usually does come through, watching the dawn break. I get up early enough to watch the dawn break and the sunrise. After that, I might go to sleep again, but I don't want to miss the sunrise. And like to hear birds, which is hard now because the road below this cottage is full of traffic morning and night now. It's become a very busy highway. Okay. So the car horns and the grinding of gears, it keeps the birds away. So they're not as common as they used to be. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, they do come occasionally, and so do beetles and butterflies and other insects. So I celebrate nature in every small way that I can. I can't walk as much as I used to. I used to be a great walker and hike all over the place, but my eyesight is weak, and I don't. After all, I'm not up to Olympic standards anymore, you might say. But so I get pleasure out of little things. I always do. And in fact, only this morning when I had my writing pad with me, as I usually do, and I was remembered out of the blue a visit I paid to Meerut, a small town outside Delhi, 50, 60 years ago. And the one incident that came to my mind and that I remembered vividly was getting up early for a morning walk. It had rained heavily in the night. The footpath was covered with neem pods because there'd been a storm. So the pods of the neem tree and the leaves were on the ground. And every time my foot crunched on a neem pod, this wonderful aroma rose from the road, the aroma of the neem. Yes, yes. And strangely enough, that's what I remember best about that visit. So I think if you have a memory for such things, little things, memory then is very friendly and useful to a writer. If you can remember the atmosphere of a period, or just the ladybird on your desk, rather than the mountain of work there. Yes. And so these little things actually stay in the memory, or they stay in mind. I think they stay in the mind of a sensitive writer, and they help you along the way. They help you to appreciate life and the world, and the ability to record it in a way. So I think that those things make a difference. Yes, the little things in life which we take for granted, yes, very often.
So this particular incident reminds me of a question that I've forever been curious to ask you. Why do they call you the road inspector?
That goes back to my when I was about 1920 in Dehradun, and I'd started out freelancing and writing for different magazines, but I had somehow this habit of going for long walks wherever I lived, if it was Dehradun or Delhi or London, and getting to know a town or a small town or a city or a village by walking about all over the place. So a lot of my material and stories came out of these walks. So people who knew me, my neighbors or others on the street, they would, having seen me on the road at odd different times in different parts of the town, they started calling me the road inspector.
I see.
Yeah, I came here because I knew it from childhood because I'd grown up partly in Dehradun, where my maternal grandparents were settled. So it was familiar territory. I'd been working in Delhi for 3 or 4 years, and I was pretty well fed up of city life, and particularly of life in Delhi at that time, in the let's say early 1960s. Maybe it's more interesting now. But so I wanted to. Also, I wasn't writing very well living in the city, so I wanted to escape, and I gave up a job which I had for some time, and I thought I'd come up to the hills. And since I knew this area well, it was easy to find a place to live. And so I moved up, and that was in the mid 1960s. And here I am, still I'm still here, like an old boulder that won't shift.
So most of your stories have a very gentle undercurrent that sort of goes in, and a lot of nature, right? And most of it comes from your personal experience, right? And writing more so can be an act of remembering, and in a way you're also kind of living it again, all over again. How do you choose
Yes.
which memory to sort of explore more and which ones to leave untouched?
Well, I have a good memory, especially good memory for childhood. Um, I especially those early years. I can remember places and incidents from when the age of say I was 3 or 4. Um, in those early first 5 or 6 years of my life were in Jamnagar, which was near the sea. It was a small state where my father actually ran a small palace school for the girls. In those days, they didn't send girls to schools and outside away from home. And so that memories of that, almost sort of a fairy tale memory, because it was a place full of palaces and gardens and the sea nearby. And then, of course, when the war broke out, my father went into the RAF, and I was put in a boarding school. And the first school was horrible. The second school was quite nice. Then he died when I was only 10, and then I had to adjust to a stepfather and my mother's second marriage. So, and I was a very lonely boy. So I spent a lot of time on my own. That's when I got the walking habit too. Walking all over the place, and I'd read a lot, discover books. I think one reason I have a good memory too is when I was a boy, I had this strange habit of making lists. So I would make a list of, say, all the books I'd read or all the movies I'd seen, including the cast. And I can tell you the cast of any film made in the 1940s or early 50s. And or lists of flowers I liked, or trees, or I just was in the habit of making lists. I don't make lists anymore, except of publishers who owe me maybe royalties. Then I tick off the one who's paid me and put a question mark against those who haven't.
I see.
Yes, so lists of publishers. And magazines. I wrote, when I started freelancing, I think I wrote and bombarded every magazine or newspaper in the land with stories, articles, everything. Now I don't write much of magazines. I just concentrate on book publication because our books are a little more permanent.
Right, right.
Yes.
Just as you were saying, I was just realizing that your stories, while it's from a personal experience, um, your stories often celebrate softness and unhurried moments, unnoticed things, right? And most of it is from the daily life, much like what we at the Kyle magazine try and do with our essays, poems, conversations, etc., right? But in today's world, sir, where everything is so fast paced and stories are put in carousel and swipe throughs, and we have attention spans that are really, really tiny. How can storytellers keep alive the act of, and not just keep alive the act, but then also invite readers to take a moment and pause and read? Yes, that's true, because it's uh, not easy to become a reader in a way. There are so many people who are not readers, who don't want to be readers, maybe apart from glancing at a newspaper or reading the prescribed text in school or college. But but once a person does become a reader, and then becomes a committed reader. You once a reader, always a reader. But it's at a first stage of discovering books that doesn't happen, automatically. Because kids grow up. Sometimes parents themselves are not interested in reading. Don't pass on that, and curiosity. Teachers maybe don't have the time. If they've got to deal with huge classes, they won't be able to give individual attention to a kid who might well be a potential reader. Um, so um, I, I guess books come our way accidentally, almost. When we are young, and in fact, it happened to me. I remember, of course, my father did put books my way, but those were, nursery rhymes and really picture books and even comic books. But it was only when I was, say, with my stepfather and mother, they didn't read at all. And they took me on a hunting expedition into the jungle near Dehradun, where they wanted to shoot a tiger. The tiger, they weren't very good shots. They never got near the tiger. But anyway, I wasn't interested in following tigers. They left me in this dark bungalow or forest rest house, where I discovered a bookshelf, an old bookshelf with books that had been dusty and lying there for a few years unread. And then I started reading, and I discovered all sorts of writers, from Dickens to P.G. Wodehouse and Agatha Christie, and all these writers from that period. And within a week, I'd read half a dozen books. And even sitting there in the veranda reading, I saw a leopard crossing the opening, the open area in front of the bungalow. And when the shikaris, the hunters, and mother, stepfather all came back without having shot anything, and I said, I just saw a leopard this morning, they laughed at me. They thought I was making it up. But actually, since then, I've seen quite a few leopards without being attacked by one or without attacking one. I'm just curious, sir, and this is out of sheer curiosity. If you were born in the internet generation, would you have written as much? If I had been born in the internet generation, in this generation, yes, sir. In a later generation. Internet. Oh, you mean because of the technology? Yes, it's an interesting question. I wanted also as a boy to act, but there were no opportunities. But now with the technology, there are lots of opportunities. I mean, we are talking to each other. So something we couldn't have done so true. 30, 40, 50 years ago. Yes. So if I had wanted to act, I would have had to try to get into into the film industry or into a theater or something. Okay. You couldn't
That's why I didn't write a play. All I did once, I wrote a little radio play because there was a radio. I mean, the BBC took it, but I didn't try writing a theatrical play because there were no theaters in. Unless I'd settled down in London or New York, I mean, there was no point in writing a play living in Dehradun. Who would have performed it?
That's right.
So I took to writing um, stories, articles, and books because these were things I could publish anywhere or everywhere if I was good enough to sell them. Actually, I say this as a young man in my 20s. I was pretty good at marketing my work. Now, marketing is something that is very modern and rather new. They didn't bother with it very much in those days. You would normally went to a publisher, he published the book, and you'd hunt in the bookshops to see if it was available or not. Somebody might review it, but you didn't have this. Nowadays, most publishers go in for marketing in a big way, and they promote a book or push the author or even get him to lit fests and and to do a tap dance or something. So so, uh, but I was aware of this, and I was good at finding the sort of paper or magazine or publisher who would take my work because it wasn't work that appealed to everybody.
That's right. That's right.
Not the sort who wrote bestsellers then.
Absolutely. So 90 years of existence, right? I have a very difficult question for you, and that is, could you remember and tell us, is there one conversation that has perhaps truly moved you and that you probably can never forget in your life?
One
Conversation.
sorry, one
Conversation.
Conversation.
What, darling?
Conversation.
Conversation.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I just I was in Jersey in the Channel Islands, and when I was 18, 19, after finishing school, my mother sent me off to Jersey, where I had an aunt and an uncle, and I stayed there with them and my cousins. I took a job, but I was writing at night, and I would send off my stories and articles as usual, to magazines all over the land. In those days, they were coming back with rejection slips, and and every day there was a thud as if something came through the letterbox. And my uncle and my cousin would say, "Oh, there's another Ruskin stories come back again." And when they used to joke about it and about my attempts to be to get published. And there was a little lady who was with us one evening, and she'd been in India when she was younger, and she told me, she interrupted the and she said, uh, "Don't you be discouraged, Ruskin. I can see that you've got a very determined chin." She said, "You got a very determined chin." And I said, "I've got it." I went and looked in the mirror. My chin didn't look at all determined, and it still doesn't. In fact, I've got double chins. But somehow I decided that yes, I do have a determined chin because she said so. And of course, instead of being discouraged, I worked harder and wrote more until people started accepting and publishing my stories, and even my first novel, which I wrote right there on that island of Jersey. So I remember that conversation, and being told I had a determined chin, even though I'm sure as chins go, it's no different from anybody else's.
So you have so many books waiting to be published. Some are already published. Some are in line. Westland, Penguin India. Could you tell us a little bit more? And I think it'll be something that all my readers would be looking forward. I'm sure they love you as much as I love you, and I think I love you the most.
Thank you so much. Well, my first publisher was Andre Deutsch in London when I got that first novel, The Room on the Roof, published, which incidentally next year will be its 70th anniversary of since it was first published, in 1956. And Andre Deutsch was then himself a new publisher and became a big publisher. But over the years, even publishers close down or die out, and that firm is no more. Then later, Penguin picked up The Room on the Roof, and they've kept it in print, and it's still doing very well. In fact, it sells better now than it did when it was first published. And then you see, and then when I came back from England, it was hard getting a novel published because we didn't have many publishers here except for school book publishers and textbook publishers. But publishers of, say, literature or, fiction, poetry, they didn't exist. Then later on, in the 80s, the Penguin came and couple of other foreign publishers, and some of ours, like Rupa, who was a distributor, they went into publishing. And there was, as you mentioned, Westland, and so there are now a number of many Indian publishers, and some are small family publishers, some are big. And over the years, I've seen publishers come and go too. And one of my early books, they only sold 3 copies, I think. Before not my fault, they closed down before they could sell anymore. Right. Or maybe because of my book, they had to close down. Right. Because it didn't sell. Right. Yeah, so there have been publishers, good ones, and some that maybe were a bit disappointing. But anyway, publishing looks to be in good health nowadays. And we have hundreds of young writers coming up. Back in the 50s, there were very few. And in fact, if they were any good, they had to try and get published abroad. So you had writers like, to mention a few names, Kamlama Kandya, Pani Bhattacharya, and some that are forgotten, but who were pretty good. Right. So it's easy to be forgotten. Sometimes people think, there's something about having your name on a book that gives you a certain permanency. Not true.
So would you tell us a little bit about your new releases, the new books that we're all excited to read?
Yeah, well, okay, I kept one here. This is the latest. Have I got it the right way up? As usual, upside down. So this is my latest. It's a book of nonsense verse, limericks, funny poems, and brought out by Puffin Books. And I wrote them last year because I couldn't sleep at nights. So since I couldn't sleep, I sat up and wrote nonsense verse.
I see.
A lot of it was very nonsensical. I had to throw it away, but somehow it preserved. Here it is. And if nothing else, if it doesn't keep you awake, it will put you to sleep. And that's that. And this is my little bestseller of the year. It's done very well.
Yes.
Hold on to your dreams.
Yes, yes.
It's been doing very well. So those are mostly Penguins, and this is a reprint of I do these chapter books too. Mm-hmm. They're short stories which turn into chapter books to help youngsters, very young readers, get started on sort of reading longer books or novels, by giving them chapters.
Right.
So they're called chapter books, Puffin chapter books. Mm-hmm. This is The Great Grandfather Tickled a Tiger. It's a well-known story, man. Okay, and so on.
And so on. Yes, we have.
And so on. I won't bore you.
Absolutely not, sir. These are books that we look forward to reading. And I do have my copy of Hold Your Dreams. I will come personally and take your signature. And I would also love to give you a copy of the Kayal magazine. I'm have a feeling that you would like it. It's about short essays. I have secretly understood that your favorite format of writing is essay. Am I right, sir?
Yeah, I love writing essays. Not everybody likes reading essays because they remind them of school.
Yes.
But I like writing them. But I write everything: short stories, essays, poems,
Everything.
Short novels, not long novels, short novels, and memoirs, anything like that. Not long novels. I get impatient.
So
I want to finish.
If you had to give one advice to a writer who wants to be published today, what would you say?
Look, depends on whether you want to be write the things you want to write, or whether you want to make a living and fit into the commercial scene. So I see what's being published in a way, and if you want to follow a trend, then you should do that. Because if certain kinds of books are in fashion or being read, for instance, nowadays every kid seems to be reading horror stories. Huh? So right, you might want to write a horror story. But if you want to write just what you want to write, then it's tougher, because then you're not looking at the market or the commercial aspect so much. So you've got to, in a way, hunt for a publisher, as I did at one time. And sometimes, and if it's a special kind of book, though, a special subject, it might be easier then to find a publisher, because some do specialize too. So the specialist publishers, and you can go to them. So again, I'd say study the market.
Yes, marketing is important.
Yes.
Sir, I have this last question, which is it was my dream to talk to you. In fact, actually, I had never dreamt that I will ever be able to talk to you. So this is now a dream that I never dreamt, but coming true. I do know that you have a dream book where you write your dreams as soon as you see them, and then you wake up and then you write it down. Do you still do that? If yes, what was the last dream you had written? And have you ever wished any of them to come true? If yes, which one?
Yeah, I have some very pleasant dreams, and I used to keep a dream book and note them down, but they don't. I don't believe they have any significance or meaning beyond uh, the pleasure or the horror of the dream. I have one dream that is I don't enjoy, but it keeps coming. It's staying in a big posh 5-star hotel in Mumbai, having a nice week there, and then find I don't have the money to pay the bill. I'm stuck. What am I going to do? Fortunately, I wake up before the bill is presented.
Yes.
And so I get these dreams of insecurity, of missing trains or planes, or not being able to get to my destination. So maybe they do have some meaning or significance. But on the other hand, I sometimes dream of old friends, or I dream of new friends. The past gets mixed up with the present. But since dreams now become very regular, I seem to dream more than I used to. Or maybe it's because I'm sleeping more lightly, so I remember them. Well, I think we remember the ones that come just before we wake up.
Yes.
So I've stopped noting them down, but I can remember them if I want to. And the odd dream has become a story too.
Yes. Yes.
The odd one. Yes, your dream can become a story. Otherwise, the dream is of importance to you, but it's not of much interest to anybody else, I guess. Because it's something very personal, after all.
Yes. Okay, so
still, I dream. Yeah, I dream of Oh, yes, some wonderful dreams. Yes. Also, of love affairs that I never had. So let's keep.
Unrequited love.
I look forward to the next one.
Well, sir, amen to that. And thank you so much for taking out time, for being so kind, for being who you are, for being such an idol, for being legendary. This has been an honor for me, sir. I would love to come and give you a copy of the Kayal magazine personally. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Ruka, and I look forward to it. Good luck to you and your magazine.
Thank you so much, sir.
If I had been born in
the internet
generation, in a later later generation.
Internet.
Oh, you mean because of the technology?
Conversation.
Sorry,
Conversation.
What, darling?
Conversation.
Conversation.